Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to each and every one of you, wherever you are in the world. I am Dr. Mina Ali, and I'd like to welcome you to the Maputo Protocol, turns 20. Now, we're going to talk in depth about this, but I do want to at least thank you all for coming. I want to welcome Columbia and NYU, who is here. We have the international policy, we have foreign policy, law, and what is the other one? Political science. So we have all international minds that are listening in today from Columbia and NYU. Thank you so very much for coming. I welcome you to this event. I welcome the embassy ambassadors, consul generals, high commissioners, diplomats, dignitaries, honored guests, supporters, and local attendees. Welcome, and allow yourself to be entertained while you are learning. Maputo Protocol turns 20 today, July 11th, 2023. And we're going to go deep into this nuance of what it means, what it is, and how it affects women, especially in the African continent. I'm going to read a few things to you when we are going forward, but I do want to help you to understand a little bit more about why we're here today. As we do things right and in order, of course, we are going to have our opening prayer. And I am going to, matter of fact, she's not here today. Okay, so I will do it in her stead. I will do this. Oh, Lord, make this day a day that is filled with your will. Allow us to understand our mental and our intellectual mobilities, our spiritual agilities, and the dexterities of the actions that you have called us to do under this guide. We are celebrating the Maputo Protocol today, and I ask that you strengthen this body of work so that those that are listening will take it and use it for the good to restore the dignity, the integrity, and the humanity to women, especially in the African continent. Then repeat it in other factions of the world. And we ask that you be filled with it, that we be reminded of you because of it, and that all things work for your good. And we ask this in the many names that you are called. Amen. Thank you so very much for coming today. All of the understandings of order and tenet are in place. And I want to thank you for coming to witness history again. We are celebrating the Maputo Protocol. And as many of you may not even knew that it existed. I know when Ambassador Chisala and I were talking about it, he was familiar with it. But again, it's not something that is promoted or understood. And a lot of times we as women, especially women of the African continent, in the African continent, are not even assured that these rights were given to us. When I read through it and I was researching, I mean, I really pulled this thing apart. When I was researching this, I saw that so many things were innately given back 20 years ago. So they realized that the problems existed even then enough to sit down as a body of leaders to give this merit. So I'm going to read the state's party to this protocol and the reasoning behind it. Considering that Article 66 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights provided for special protocols or agreements, if necessary, to supplement the provisions of the African Charter, and that of the assembly heads of the state of governments of the Organization of the African Union, we meet here at the 31st Ordinary Session in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. We endorse the resolutions and recommend that the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights to elaborate a protocol on the rights of women in Africa. Article 2 of the African Charter on Human Rights enshrines the principle of non-discriminatory rights on the grounds of race, ethnic group, color, sex, language, religion, political, or any other opinion. It is written, any other opinion, national and social origin, fortune, birthright, or societal status. Further considering that in Article 18 of this said charter, human rights and the people's rights call on all states, meaning when we say states in the African continent, it means all of the countries, all states and parties thereof to eliminate every discrimination against women and ensure the protection of rights of women as it is stipulated in international declaration and conventions outside of this. So what they did is they said, there's other people that did this. We're going to do it for our women here. Recalling that women's rights have been recognized and guaranteed in all international rights instruments, notably the Universal Declaration of International Human Rights from the UN, the International Covenant on Social Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and its optional protocol, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. This international and regional convention conveys that the relating of the rights of women as being inalienable, interdependent, and indivisible as human rights. So this is just the beginning notion of it. So it's saying that even those that were formulated to make sure that this took place knew that there was a pathology, there was a history, there was an origin to this, and it was decided in this small little area in East Africa, a Maputo region, and you can Google that while we're talking, that this was to be declared as our faction of Declaration of Human Rights. So one of the things that shocked me is that 20 years later, here we are talking about, and I have to read this preface, this preamble to this covenant, because most people don't even know it exists. I actually polled about 30 women that were from different areas, South Africa, Central Africa, around Angola and DRC. I even went up centrally to Chad and Niger and Central Republic. And I asked them, and I said, do you know about the Maputo report? And some of them were like, what? Do you know that this existed? They were like, what existed? What is Maputo? And I said, Maputo is the understanding of our Declaration of Human Rights. Oh yeah, the UN did that. And I was sitting here like, wait a minute, the UN did this? I said, no, we did this 20 years ago, July 11, 2003. They were like, no, it was before that. And they were adamant. So these are people that actually are living in Africa, that are talking to me through Zoom and our connections through gender and human rights work. And these are people that didn't even know it existed. So it was surprising to me. And every time I say that, Maputo was not acknowledged by those that are theirs because it wasn't shared. Well, we're going to change that here at the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. And we're going to bring ambassadors, especially our esteemed ambassador from the African Union, who is going to come in and is going to offer us an understanding as to what it is that was necessary for us to learn in the givings of what this Maputo report gives us and ordains. Oh, okay. Our speaker today is none other than Ambassador Dr. Chisala Bwalya. He is Mission Ambassador to the Republic of Zambia and the African Union, and he speaks on many, many platforms. He gives a great oratory report. He just did one a couple of weeks ago and spoke about the status of women. And I think that was so poignant because here we are dealing with the UN and we're dealing with CSW, which is the Commission on the Status of Women, and we do that in March. But what about the rest of the year? What about the data that comes into it? Well, he has a research and data organization that he does very, very poignant and powerful work through. And his report was giving the ordination of the status of women. And one of the things that I got out of his last report was that we are not really taking heed to the importance of women. And I remember saying that we're gonna tuple that when we talk about the Maputo report. But what I admired the most is that he took it upon himself to give us the update to this and some of the criteria to this. So Ambassador Bwalya, if you can unmute your mic and give us just maybe a 30 second to 1 minute overview of that last event that you did, so that we can understand some of the greatness that you brought into the instrument of your mission, please.
Greetings to everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Amina, for having me today. Greetings to all the students from NYU, all the students joining us from different universities, ambassadors. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a brief overview of the last event that we had. We were basically looking at the aspect of the role that the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights plays in Africa and how FIGHR collaborates with the African Union. And there are many, many other ways that we mentioned that we've been working with the African Union. For instance, we've been running campaigns around Africa. Then we're also collaborating with grassroots organizations. As you may know, most of the fire ambassadors are running different CSOs, CBOs, NGOs on the ground. And so fire ensures that it collaborates, partners with them, supports the different cause on the ground to ensure that we achieve our purpose. And at the end of the day, the mission of fire is to see to it that we attain a gender equal society where both men, women, and children are respected and their rights are upheld. And so that is the basic work that we do. So as we work with the African Union, this instrument, the Maputo Protocol, becomes so handy because the people that we work with are women, mostly women, and those women mostly in rural areas who do not understand the concept of what this Maputo Protocol is about. And it is sad. Dr. Amina, before we even came here, I also took time to speak to a few women if they knew anything about the Maputo Protocol. And imagine out of the 30 that I spoke to, only 2 had an idea about the Maputo Protocol. And that was very sad. You see that women have a lot to offer. Women have this powerful instrument which has been drafted for them, which has been adopted for them, but they do not understand it. They do not know what is in there. And I feel that is why this day is so significant, that we're putting to light the many, 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 many rights that women have and that they do not understand. And so we'll try by all means possible to simplify that so that they know their rights. And that is the goal today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for that overview. And it rings very true that we have a set of skills amongst us. We have talents, gifts, and abilities that we can use to promote this. So now, when much is given, much is required. I was just on a call with our grant writer, who's here, Her Excellency Carmen Burks. She is the grant writer for the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights and Harbor Heritage University. But one of the things that we were talking about is the founding story to FIRE and Harbor Heritage. And, a lot of times we're given so much and we don't know what to do with it. And to know that there is something out here as powerful as this, and we're getting ready to go into it line by line, literally 32 articles we're going to go into very quickly, but to overview what it is that they are. And we're going to see that there is much that has been given to us. Now it is our right as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as CBO founders, that we are to hold our leaders accountable. If not, we need to be the leader ourselves. We are who we have been waiting for. And title aside, if you're not doing the work to assure this, then you're doing a disjustice to the women. So I thank you all for coming to be a part of this history-making event. 20 years in the making, and we are putting this on the map, at least for the ones that are doing the work on the ground, and we are making this evident, and this is going to be part of our Constitution for FIRE, and we're putting it in there as of today. I was going to announce that later on, but I'm just excited right now. And we're going to announce that we're putting the Maputo report as a part of our Constitution, and it has to be knowledgeable and known for all of our ambassadors to at least understand it. Everyone is going to get a copy. Everyone is going to read it. Everyone is going to have to sign off that they read it so that it is going to be a part of our foundation and our integrity. Of course, Ambassador Bwalya is probably going to lead the charge in making sure that everyone keeps up with it. But he is going to be the lead in this and making sure that everyone understands. And if they have questions, to come to him because he is our representative faction for the African Union. And this is going to be the charge of what we do. So this is going to be a huge and very, very monumental piece for the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. And without further ado, we're going to get into the story right now. What is the Maputo Protocol? The document itself is quite lengthy. I have it in front of me here, and it consists of quite a few document pages. But in all, it is 25 pages deep, and if you notice it, if you can see it on my screen, oh yeah, okay. It has a woman on the front of it. I'm going to see if I can put it in. I'm going to see if I can put it in the chat because I know you can add documents to the chat now. And I'm going to see if I can give everyone a copy of it. And if we can, no, I guess not. No, I can't give it. But what I can do is if you ask or if you want it, just reach out. You can get you can get a copy of it online, but the actual one that is from the African Union, the one we are using, is the one that we are going to be speaking from today. And if you have that in front of you, we're going to start on page 6. Page 6 at the very top of it should say firmly convinced, which is part of the preamble to it. And it starts with Article 1. And the document simply states all of the 32 articles that they put in there for our rights. And we're going to go through them. And in the interest of time, we're going to go through them. This is what it looks like on the front. If you want to pull it up on your, and just put African Union, Maputo, M-A-P-U-T-O, I keep saying U, but it's an O, a protocol, and it should pop right up. And it's a PDF. And you can pull it up. We're on page 6 of it. That's where we're going to start. And we're going to start with Article 1, definitions. The way we're going to do this today is, Ambassador, if you want to step in, just step in and just say if you want to add something to the articles, and I'm just going to go through them based on the ones that we pulled out. And if you want to add something to it, please, please, please add your insight, add the knowledge, add what it means in the African continent, which is very, very, very poignant. And then add what it is that you want to say for each article, okay? So Article 1, we're going to go to F. It means discrimination against women. It says for the purpose of this present protocol, the discrimination against women. This states that any distinction, exclusion, or restriction of any differential treatment based on sex and whose objectives or effects compromises or destroys the recognition, listen to that, destroys the recognition, enjoyment, or the exercise by women, regardless of their marital status, of human rights and fundamental freedoms on all spheres of life. If that's not inclusive, I don't know what is. It says destroy the recognition, the enjoyment, or the exercise by women, regardless of their marital status. Remember that, because that's a big thing in the African continent, you know, your marital status. Deflects from the human rights and the fundamental freedoms in all spheres of life. So you can't, please don't, they open up with a powerful one. Don't even, any sphere of any part of our life needs to be recognized and enjoyable. Ambassador, any comments?
Yes, please. I think the definition of discrimination against women here is very profound. More so that there are some key words that you need to take note of. Especially words like effects compromise, destroy the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, regardless of their marital status, of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Now, like you mentioned, the aspect of marital status in the African continent is very strong, because it is well expected from our tradition that when you reach a particular age, you're supposed to be married. And so you find that most women in the African continent face a lot of pressure when they reach a particular age, more so that they don't have a choice whether they want to remain single or whether they want to get married, because this is tradition, this is a custom, and they have to go with that. And that is the basic aspect of discrimination. Because if we're talking about a woman who is discriminated against, it is someone who's not given a chance to enjoy their full rights. If someone is given a chance to enjoy their full rights, they have the ability to choose what they want to do without compromising anything for it. This is a right that they have. Why should someone put you in a cocoon, in a container, to think for you, to give things to you, when you are a free human being? And so that is the aspect of discrimination that I'm talking about. So let us just be able to understand the key words that are there. Effects compromise, destroys the recognition, and many other things that are there. So this is a very good definition of discrimination against women. Thank you.
Thank you. Article 2, elimination of discrimination against women. Now, this is huge. Now, the first one talks about inalienable rights of enjoyment, but this is the elimination of the discrimination. That means anything that leads up to that is what they're eradicating. So this is to integrate. We're in Article 2, letter C, because this is the one we pulled out. To integrate a gender perspective in their policy decisions, legislation, development plans, programs, and activities in all other spheres of life. That means that anything that warrants defense from any legal status, a legislative status, or their local programs and activities should keep their views intact. And this is very, very huge. That means that anything that we do should not be haltering or hindering to us in our day-to-day. Ambassador, any comments?
Yes, please. I feel the most important thing about this article C is inclusive integration of women in different programs across board. So we're basically talking about policy decision, talking about legislation, talking about development plans. We're talking about the different programs and activities in different spheres of life. So this article basically focuses more on inclusive integration, that we should not just focus on one particular gender, especially the male folk, but also be able to include women in the development process. No wonder we're saying that a gender perspective, a gender responsive program is very important in whatever that is done. So meaning that every company, every organization, every institution should have a particular gender square which they can refer to, so as being able to give equal opportunities to both men and women alike. So at the end of the day, inclusive integration of all genders is basically important. And in this case, I'll just talk about the African continent. There has been a lot of malignment, especially for women, that most of the women are not given a chance to contest in elections. They're not given a chance to be part of the developmental programs. They're not given a chance to be part of policy decisions. We say that boardrooms are just for men because men are more powerful, and then we are undermining the power of women. So I feel this clause on gender is basically about power and influence. In as much as men have the necessary power that they should possess, women equally have that power. And so having an inclusive, integrated gender policy program within an institution is important, so that we give equal chance and equal access to each and every person in that particular institution, without anyone feeling being left out or being discriminated against. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Okay, we're going to move to Article 3. Article 3 is the right to dignity, and this article states, parties shall adopt and implement appropriate measures to ensure the protection of every woman's right to respect her dignity and the protection of women from all forms of violence, particularly sexual and verbal violence. Now, this was 20 years ago they put this in. 20 years ago they said this, that they have a right to protection from all forms of violence, particularly sexual and verbal violence. Ambassador?
I'll give a scenario. 3 weeks ago, I traveled back home to Kabwe, and there's been so much of an emphasis on dress code, women and their dress code, and so where I come from, people believe that women are not supposed to wear miniskirts, they're not supposed to wear bum shorts in public. They have to dress appropriately, because if they dress inappropriately, then they are scolded in public. And imagine this lady was with her mom and she was wearing a miniskirt. As she was walking towards ShopRite, a market store, a group of men just followed her. Said, no, you're a prostitute. You cannot be wearing that in public. They stripped her off of her clothes, in public, and everyone was watching. Up until the different women that were just around us, went there, got her, gave her a wrapper, and then she tied that wrapper around her waist. And that is how she was protected. Now, from that scenario, you can tell that the right to dignity is not there. That woman was not respected. Now we're saying that a woman has the right to choose what she wants to do. Let her choose what she wants to wear, because we're saying that, and the reason that they give when they do this is, when we see you in miniskirts, you arouse us, and so that gives us an edge to sleep with you. But that should not be the case. Imagine people that go to the beach every day. You see women in bikinis. Why don't they rape them? Why don't they abuse them? So I feel it's the mindset. And so that is the kind of toxic masculinity that should be washed out from the different minds out there. So at the end of the day, what we're saying is that, women should be given the right to dignity. We need to ensure that we protect them from both sexual and verbal violence. We should not be seeing women, every time we see a woman, you're seeing a sexual partner in them. No. I think there is more to sex. There's more to life than sex, and there's more to life than the verbal insults and the verbal abuse that we give them. And so I feel at the end of the day, we need to ensure that we promote and protect women's dignity. Let them choose what they want to wear. Let them choose to do what they want to do, because it is their right. So everyone is entitled to dignity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes. Article 4 says the right to life, integrity, and security of the person. Now, this one goes a little deeper. 2C says, identify the causes and consequences of violence against women and take appropriate measures to prevent and eliminate such violence. And then I says, provide adequate budgetary and other resources for the implementation and monitoring of such actions aimed at preventing and eradicating violence against women. Oh, it's written that not only are we supposed to, and C, identify the causes and consequences, which is what Ambassador Bwalya's organization does, but there is a right for the states to provide adequate budgetary and other resources for the implementation and monitoring of such actions aimed at preventing and eradicating violence against women. So they're supposed to be paying for this. This is why it's so important to read these things. This is why it's so important to understand that this was written 20 years ago, that the governments were supposed to put in place money to do this. There's supposed to be officers and ministers. There's supposed to be overseers and judges that are supposed to be over the courts of understanding that if the rights are violated, that there should be some punishment. 20 years ago. So what we're understanding is now that we have a document that is in front of us, now we have modern technology to disseminate it better than we did 20 years ago. These states should understand that this is now going to be implemented a little bit more. It's written that we are supposed to have it in Article 4, 2C and 2I. Let's go to the next article, Article 5. It's the elimination of harmful practices. Ambassador, I need you to speak on D, the letter D. It says protection of women who are at risk of being subjected to harmful practices or all other forms of violence, abuse, and intolerance. Speak on that for a minute, please.
Sure. Protection of women who are at risk of being subjected to harmful practices or other forms of violence, abuse, and intolerance. Well, there are a lot of unimaginable things that women go through, not just in the African continent, but even across board. The levels of discrimination, the levels of abuse, the levels of, the harmful practices that are still ongoing. Remember that this document was written 20 years ago, and it was written within the context of what was happening at that particular time. And the hope was that within the course of time, 20 years later, we were supposed to see change, that since most of the countries, 49 countries, are signatory to this document, they should implement, good practices. They should eliminate, all the harmful cultural practices that impede on women, And at the end of the day, you find that 20 years later, those harmful practices are still there, and they're still being practiced in African communities and across board. For instance, the female genital mutilation. Yes, 20 years later, it was so rampant, but not saying that it is done. No, other communities and other cultures are still adopting it, and they're still taking it as a rite of passage for a woman. They say that if a young girl is not mutilated, then she has not attained growth or maturity. So for them, it's a sign of growth. And that is a wrong practice, and that has continued, to be practiced. And now the contradiction that exists right now is the state, there is a law that is there. But at the end of the day, remember that different people are coming from different communities and different customs. And now the traditional leaders are coming in and saying that, you know what, these are our customs. And, so The state should not interfere in the workings of the different traditional rural settings. And that is wrong. As long as the person is Zambian, as long as the person is Kenyan, they are Kenyan, regardless of what tribe they are, regardless of what ethnic tribe or ethnic group they belong to. They are Kenyan, they are Zambian. And so whatever harmful practice that is there, that impinges negatively on their life, should be discarded. And that is what we need to work on, because these practices are still there. There's also some harmful Imbuza ceremonies that have been practiced here in the Zambia, where, when a girl attains puberty, she's secluded for some days, and now she's taught how to do this, how to do that, how to sleep with men, how to do, and those are harmful practices, because what are we making of our young girls when they leave those homes? They're becoming promiscuous. They're now parading themselves in the streets. And those are some of the things we need to eradicate. But, countries are silent about this. No wonder why leaders should be held accountable for this. So at the end of the day, dear listeners and viewers, we need to ensure that we protect our women from the risk of being subjected to these harmful practices. Other harmful practices can be, sometimes it's bullying. Cyberbullying. What we've seen, most of our young women have committed suicide on social media. They've been cyberbullied, maybe because of their complexion, maybe because of their color, maybe because of the way they dress. Those are harmful practices. Maybe that was not there at that time, but it is here now, and we've seen what is happening. Kids are being bullied in school. Kids are being abused in homes. Other than that, another harmful practice that I can talk about, Dr. Amina, the inheritance rights, the cleansing practices that are happening on the African continent. We're saying that when a woman is widowed, when a husband dies, the brother of the late husband should sleep with her as a cleansing method. And that is wrong, because they're diseases. We're subjecting women to diseases.
Correct.
There's HIV, there are many other things, STDs, STIs. And at the end of the day, we are impeding negatively on the rights of these women. So we need to ensure, as countries, as states, we need to ensure that we stand firm on this protocol and on this clause, that we need to protect our women. Let us identify the harmful practices that are still occurring in our communities and put restrictive measures to eradicate them or to discard them permanently. Thank you so much.
Correct. I agree. No, I'm with you. Wow. Yeah, because the next one is going to flow right into what you just said. And this is where I really I really get my mojo from. Article 6 is on marriage. We're going to talk about, it says state parties shall ensure that no marriage shall take place without the free and full consent of both parties. Shall I read that again for those that practice child brides? The state parties agree that no marriage shall take place without the free and full consent of both parties. And B says the minimum age of marriage for women shall be 18. 20 years ago. So why do we still have child brides? Why is that an issue here? And why is that something that, and I saw something on LinkedIn a couple of days ago that spoke about how child brides needs to be reexamined. No, we don't need to reexamine it. We need to just stop it. We don't need to re-examine while child brides happen. That's condoning the behavior. That's saying that there's reasoning behind, let's look into this. No, there's no pathology in it. It's just ignorance. There's no way a 40-year-old should be marrying a 12-year-old. I'm just saying. And there's no reason why two children should be married just because the families want to keep the bloodlines pure. And there's practices in certain areas, not just in Africa, but there's certain practices in the Asian countries where children are married when the girl has turned 9 or 10, whenever she gets her menses, and they're married so that the blood will stay pure. They have first cousins and second cousins that marry each other so that the blood is pure. Now, I don't know how pure your blood is, but if I married my first, probably scream, he would have no blood left. But there is a huge disparity in that, because you're marrying children and you're giving them an adult responsibility when they're still in the formation of their brain. The prefrontal cortex is still going crazy and hogwire. And they are not in the mindset to understand the standards of what a marriage, a union. They don't even know how to share properly right now at this stage. And yet they're entering into a contract that their parents are doing for the sake of keeping the bloodline together, for making sure that the child will be married, that there won't be any shame in the family, there won't be any, she'll be pure when she gets married, so we're going to marry her off early. All of these innuendos. This says that not only are both parties supposed to agree, which means they can't be children, because children will not agree to that ever, unless they're encouraged or coerced, and that the minimum age of marriage of women should be 18. So that even calls it, that's even better than United States, which is the minimum age is 16. So the protocols set in place is even better than the ones in the United States. So, and you can be 15 with a parent's signature or be pregnant. But now with the laws, if you're pregnant, you don't even need parental consent because you're considered an emancipated minor. So as long as you're pregnant, you can get married at any age here in the United States. Well, the Maputo Protocol states, marriage shall take place within the free and full consent of both parties, and the minimum age is 18. Look how powerful that is. Article 7. Now we get into separation, divorce, and annulment of the marriage. Now, this one is really, really powerful, especially for women, because, you know, so certain communities, just like Ambassador Bwalya said, that the wife becomes the property of the brother of the husband that just died, when even in Islam, it tells us that family members are not allowed to enter into a woman. So she can't marry her brother or his brother for that matter. She can't marry an uncle or a cousin that's not third, I think it's the second cousin and after. And the second cousin has to be of distance. That means that when they say distant cousin, they don't mean just, I don't know you. Distance as in, I didn't even know that they were in my fold, which means they may be in another state or another country or around the world somewhere, and let them commingle to understand that. So separation of annulment and marriage in Article 7, it states, in case of separation and divorce or annulment of marriage, women and men shall have the right to an equitable sharing of the joint property deriving from the marriage. So if you buy a house while you get married, 50-50. If you have children, the time should be spent 50-50 until they're of age. Then the girls go with the women, the boys go with the men. Not because of sex, but because a woman can never raise a boy to be a man. Never done ever in the history of the world. They can get them to adulthood and they can get them to a mature age, but they can never teach a boy child to be a man. So that's where we assume and assert in our traditions that boys go to the men, girls stay with the mother, and we get the roles established. So this is where the order sets in. And I know in Islamic communities, we have that like chiseled in. I know in some other communities that are more tribal, they tend to have the children stay with the mother, boy and girl. But then when the boy becomes of age, he separates and goes with the father. But in case of separation or divorce, the wife gets half, the husband gets half. This is 20 years ago. Africa, 20 years ago, they were saying this. So this is where we have to understand how powerful these articles are in what we are going to reestablish in their enforcement. Article 8, access to justice and equal protection before the law. And this one goes without saying. Article 8, C says the establishment of adequate education and other appropriate structures with particular attention to women to sensitize everyone to the rights of women. I'll read that again. The establishment of adequate educational and other appropriate structures with particular attention to women and to sensitize the rights of women. So we're supposed to be able to give education that teaches this, what we're doing today, that there are protections before the law, and that whatever it is that we have, that we are to be, the articles are to sensitize us. And in Article Article 8F, it says reform of existing discriminatory laws and practices in order to promote and protect the rights of women. So Ambassador Chisala mentioned that there are laws that were in place that allowed FGM. Now this says 20 years ago to reform the existing discriminatory laws and in order to promote and protect the rights of women. So he even put it out there. Ambassador Chisala said it was wrong 20 years ago, and they knew it, and they wrote this protocol about it. And now in it, it says to eradicate and reform the existing protocols that are unjust to women. So we're seeing that this goes to a higher level and an understanding of greatness for what it is that we are seeing in the continuation of this. And it does my heart good to see this because women, children, and young adults are coming up and seeing this and understanding that this is their right. Ambassador Chisala, on Article 9, the right to participation in the political and decision-making process. This one is huge. Number 2 states, parties shall ensure increased and effective representation and participation of women in all levels of decision-making. Speak on that, please.
Sure. Maybe before I speak to Article 9, I just want to add something on Article 8.
Sure, please.
Can I?
Yes,
Article
please.
8C, just talking about the establishment of adequate educational and other appropriate structures. I feel what we need to work on now is we need to do a comparative study, especially in different communities and different African states, and see the levels of literacy. You know, our people able to read, are they able to write? Yes, the most people are not able to read and write, but are we able to retranslate this document or these laws into a local language, which will be easy for them to understand? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to ensure that women know of these rights. But how can they know of these rights if they're all written in English? Why can't you translate them to Chivemba? Why can't you translate them to Tonga? Why can't you translate them to Swahili so that other people are also able to understand? So I think there should be a little bit of understanding there so that we will translate them into a local language that even the people that are most illiterate will be able to understand when these laws are read to them. Yes. And then let me go to Article 9. State parties for increased and effective representation and participation of women at all levels of decision making. So governments basically have a responsibility of ensuring that they create a conducive environment where women can also be equal partakers or equal participants. So for instance, when you look at most of the ministers that we have, for instance, in Africa, look at Zambia, for instance, you see that the majority of the ministers that we have now in cabinet are men, and only I think 4 or 5 are women. And there you can see that there is a disparity in representation. So if there is a woman who wants to push an agenda and that agenda is not accepted by the other pool, what is going to happen? It will not go through. So at the end of the day, governments have a responsibility of ensuring that they promote equality in appointments in public office, appointments in leadership positions, appointments in different institutions. They have to be equal so that women are also given a fair chance at leadership. Yes, it's a game of power and influence, but women are as influential and as powerful as men are. Today, we're seeing a rise of a lot of women who are now running boards, women who are CEOs, women who are running multi-million-dollar corporations, women who are running banks and many other things. That shows that women are capable of doing this. So when they did this 20 years ago, it was the time when the aspect of discrimination was so high, and now there's been a little transition. Look at countries like Rwanda. Rwanda at least has maintained that level of equal representation of both men and women in parliament, and many other countries. And so other countries should also emulate that. And so at the end of the day, what we're trying to say is that each country should ensure that women are also represented. They have an effective representation and participation at all levels of decision making in government. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Article 10, we're talking about right to peace. And Article 10 says in 2D, says in all levels of the structures established for the management of camps and settlements for asylum seekers, refugees, returnees, and displaced persons, in particular women. So what does that mean? When we have here in the United States, we have this thing called immigration and the immigration policy, and we have a thing called INS, immigration and naturalization. And people come here and they seek asylum or refugees or that type thing. While they're there in Africa, it says here in Article 10 that on all levels of the structure of the states, they are to establish for the management of camps and settlements for asylum seekers, refugees, returnees, and displaced persons, in particular women. Now, if you look at this thing in, I think it's Tanzania, where they are banning Africans, well, Tanzania is Africa. I don't know why they just assume that they're not African, but we won't get into that. but they are banning people that are not from Tanzania, and they're settling on the shores of Libya. And I think they said, yeah, it was on Libya, and they're pushing them out and saying, you're not from Tanzania, you're not Tanzanian, get out and stay out, but you're African. And this pertains to that very thing right there, because they put men and women out. So if you're going to put them out, you're supposed to put them in structures that were established for the management of camps and settlement. So that means if you're going to put them out, you got to put them in something, because they have that right. The women. So if the women have it, of course, the natural right is the men are to follow. But if nothing else, speaking just on the women right now, that they are supposed to have settlement and camps for asylum seekers, refugees, returnees, who are the ones that they just put out, they're returning back to their home, and displaced persons, in particular women. I just saw an article yesterday that said that they have 8 women in this one particular area that they're throwing people out of in Tanzania, 8 women that are pregnant. So where are the women going to go when they birth? Where are the women going to have their babies? Where is the safety and the security of the medicine or the health? So now you just violated this protocol. Tanzania just took it upon themselves to violate this protocol. And now they're going to sit in they should have a war crimes court, and they should be held accountable, because they put these women in dire straits, and they, per this article, have a right to peace. So 10 is very, very huge, very understood as to what it is that we are dealing with, and why it is that we should hold our governments accountable. It's written, it's here, and we have that right. Article 11, protection of women in armed conflicts. This one should topple on why we have, we call it soldier rape. Why is it that women are being raped by soldiers when they're coming into their area or their village or their town? Article 11, protection of women in armed conflicts, says, number 4, state parties shall take all necessary measures to ensure that no child, especially girls under 18 years of age, take a direct part in hostilities, that no child is recruited as a soldier. So if the soldier wasn't recruited to do it, why are the children being accosted by it? The soldiers were not recruited to rape. So why are these girls and women raped? Protection of women. Now, this is 20 years ago. So clearly they knew that the soldiers were doing what they weren't supposed to do 20 years ago. Put it into order. Now look at the armed conflicts that we have right now in all of our countries. I just want you to think of just one country in the African continent that you know is under fire. And I guarantee you, each of those countries that you're thinking of right now has a girl or a woman that has been raped by a soldier. But it is written that there is a protection in armed conflicts. Ambassador, please speak to that a little bit.
Yes, please. The aspect of child soldiers still exists on the African continent. I'm sure in other countries across the globe. I'll give an example of the Congo, where we have, a number of child soldiers who are recruited when they're still young, and I always say this, the leaders who are creating these child soldiers are creating Frankenstein monsters who will prey on the same systems that created them. And these systems include women. So you see that most of these children who are going through different rituals, protection rituals, they are shown how to hold a gun when they're young, they are not taught how to respect women. So women in those areas are brutally raped and murdered each and every day. And this is news that you don't even hear about. This is news that is silent. Yes, we're able to hear about a number of things. Oh, there is this happening in the US, there is this happening in South Africa, there is this happening in Zambia, but these are issues that we don't get to hear about. We don't get to hear about child soldiers that are recruited, child soldiers who are raping women, child soldiers who are raping women and burying them alive, So there is a lot that is happening, Child soldiers who are mutilating women in those different areas. There are a number of areas where we have these children who are soldiers. So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that we need to protect our women in armed conflicts because they are mostly the target in these areas. When there is a camp of soldiers in a particular area, bear with me, 15 of those women are going to be abused by part of those soldiers if there are 20 women in that area. And that is very sad. So what are we doing for our African child, our African girl child? What are we doing for, our girl child in Pakistan? What are we doing for our girl child in Libya? What are we doing for the girl child in Syria? What are we doing for them? Because they are going through this and they're prone to this. So I feel at the end of the day, countries, states, leaders should be held responsible for this. They should be held accountable for this, because they're the ones that are condoning these particular hostile systems to continue, existing in those particular countries. But if a country puts up a law, if a country, puts up a gentleman says, we have to uproot the child soldiers, we have to uproot the rebel camps that are raping our women, that can be done. So it all goes with effort. So I feel our leaders need to be more respectful for women, and they need to be held accountable for this. Of course, the world has been so silent about these issues, but I think it's high time that we're celebrating 20 years and this has resurfaced. We need to go back to the drawing board and understand how we can protect our women in armed conflict areas, especially in the Congo, where there are a lot of rebels. Thank you.
That's right. You're right. You said that. We got to re-examine this, and that's why we're doing this today. And it's pretty lengthy and it's pretty long, but the recording is going to go out, and we're going to use this as a teaching tool for those people that are needing this information. And this recording, of course, is going to be going to the schools so that they will hear it and they will understand it. And I know Columbia and NYU, I know you have a filter of questions, but in the interest of time, we're going to try to keep this in the next 30 minutes and be done with it. So if you can just hold off on the questions, I greatly appreciate it. We're at Article 12, so we are moving at a good clip, but we want to get through at least to 20 before we start even talking about questions. Okay, Article 12 says the right to education and training. This is 1C, says to protect women, especially the girl child, from all forms of abuse, including sexual harassment in schools and other educational institutions, and provide for sanctions against the perpetrators of such practices. Now, I heard this when I was digging through this. I heard that not only are the child heard, and when I say heard, I mean this is what I heard that this was saying. Not only does a girl child have rights to get an education without being harassed, without being accosted, but not only that, but the school systems have to provide sanctions against the perpetrators. That means that they should have rights enacted in them to be able to draw charges against these people. So in other words, a child may not be able, they may not be old enough to bring charges. The adults have to do it. So the school should be the one to bring the charges against the assailant. They are the ones that should have martial law, as we call it here in the United States, that says that you have the right to use your powers to make a citizen's arrest, to make a municipal arrest, which means that it's of the jurisdiction. In this case, you make a scholastic arrest because it's in the educational system, and you make that authority set so that there will be no other child that has to endure this piece. And this is what is so important, that there are protections 20 years ago that says schools, step up, protect our children. If you see something, say something, put it into action, and allow their training to go along as a hitch. There should be like a bubble. A child should be in a bubble when they grow up. That anything that's out there in the world that would attack them, they should be protected by this bubble. It should be just able to bounce off of them. They're not affected by whatever is happening. And we as adults should be that bubble. And the right to education and training based on Article 12 says that is to protect women, especially the girl child, from all forms of abuse, including sexual harassment in schools and other educational institutions. That means we're putting in place in Harbor Heritage University that you are going to be protected from all forms of harassment, because this is going to be in a part of our Constitution. So knowing that is to know that all forms of harassment, and the school is going to be able to step up. If the child is scared because of retaliation or because of protected status, we will step up, and we will be that mandated reporter to step up. And that should be established around the world through this right. Article 13.
Can I just add something?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sure. I feel one of the things that learning institutions should adopt or should do is they need, a gender-based violence policy within the university within the framework of the university. And that is it. I'll give you an example.
Yes.
Most of the young girls today, and this is from a personal experience, a close friend of mine, a girl, who were together in university. And little did I know that this particular lecturer was sexually abusing her for grades. Because it was always threatening her that if you're not going to have sex with me, I'm going to fail you. If you're not going to have sex with me, you will not go to this trip. If you're not going, and she constantly continued doing that because she was scared. She was put in a vulnerable spot where she had to give it out. And that is so wrong. So you find that there is a lot happening in universities where male lecturers are taking advantage of female students. They sleep with them for grades. Another typical example I can give you is there was a video that was circulating even on YouTube. I think you find the documentary where lecturers in a particular university in Ghana were exposed by female students to say, these lecturers even have, a particular room, at the university where they take female students there. They have sex with female students from there, which is so wrong. Why are you abusing the girl child? And the girls were crying for help. It was a cry for help. Say, can the world please hear us? Can they help us? Because even if we report these lecturers to the superiors, the cases are just brushed off because they're saying that they want to protect the dignity of the school. Now, which is more important, a life or the school? And that is what we're talking about. So each school, each university, each learning institution is supposed to adopt a gender-based violence policy that gives a roadmap to what is going to happen if a girl is harassed. Who should she report to? The steps that she should follow, the counseling processes, and many other things that should be contained there. So it is a call to the Ministry of Education, offices across the globe in different countries, to different governments in charge of universities and learning institutions, that you need to pay a closer ear to these issues on the ground. Girls are crying, in silence, and we are constantly not putting so much effort in listening to them. Let us go on the ground and investigate these issues. Trust me, when one girl comes out and says, this lecturer raped me, trust me, 100 more are going to come out and say, this lecturer has been abusing us. Everyone is just scared because they're going to protect themselves. So at the end of the day, governments and the different ministries responsible for education should ensure that they adopt a gender-based violence policy that will speak to this. Thank you.
You're most welcome. And one of the things that you touched on it, I'm going to talk about number 2, where it says promote the environment and retention of girls in schools and other training institutions and the organization of programs for women who leave school prematurely. So that means if they are violated, and let's say they get pregnant and they have the baby and they have to leave school because, of course, especially in the continent, you don't normally have it. You go to a special school. I know here in the United States, they try to keep them in school, but now they homeschool them if they get pregnant. But what happens when they decide to have a baby and once they have the baby, they're wanting to return to school? Well, they're saying 20 years ago, you have rights that not only can you return to school, but the school needs to make adages for you to come back. So it's not like it's one of those things where, oh, you got pregnant, that's on you, or oh, that's woe is me, and I got a baby now, that's your business. They're saying that the schools are supposed to make way for you to come back. That's number 2, Article 12, number 2. Make way for you to come back. So to encourage you, so have adequate childcare, or at least establish childcare or connection with it, and allow the women to be able to have this as a standard for what it is that they need so that they can return to school. And this is 20 years ago, guys. Again, I keep pushing that issue because I want you to understand how powerful this was, that 20 years ago they saw this, and now what's happening today. Article 13.
We have the re-entry policy. We have a policy called the re-entry policy in Zambia that allows young girls who fall pregnant in school to be reinstated when they give birth, when they put to bed. Yeah, so I think that is something that is workable and that is working well in Zambia.
Thank you. See, what did I say? And that is a program that encourages you to go back. It's not that, oh, if you decide to go back, we might have something for you. No, we encourage you to go back. And we look to the people specifically in that demographic of knowing that what it is that they need is what it is we need to provide. And see, in Zambia, higher intelligence country. And I use that in certain countries. They even had that on the map, that the higher intelligence. I don't know why they picked us apart that way, but they say Zambia is one of the countries with the higher intelligence. And they are seeing that one of the things that we are looking at is the conference of encouragement. So it's one thing to say, oh, if you want it, it's here, and but we're not gonna, it's here. We'll give you something. But it's encouraging you to come back to the standard of care that you left before you had the baby. So that's a huge thing. Okay, Article 13. Article 13 speaks to economic and social welfare rights. So of course, I am all for this one. And it says, Article 13H says, take the necessary measures to recognize the economic value of the work of women in the home. You want me to read that again? Because I will read it again. Take necessary measures to recognize the economic value of the work of women in the home. So that means home-based businesses 20 years ago was recognized. It wasn't that, oh, that's a little business that she does on the side, so she can stay in the house and that religious oppression. No, that's a business and it earns money, just like your business that you have to leave the house to go to earns money. And it's recognizable under the surefirings of the economic and social welfare rights of this protocol. So it is saying that you are to acknowledge that as an income. So she is a working woman, not a woman, not a wife that is at home that has a little business. No, we're not going to say that anymore, because that delineates her empowerment to serve in that capacity. If that money is surviving the family and it is supporting the family, then why is it a little job? If that income is allowing the children to eat, why is not of the same value that it does to pay the rent? Because you need both. So that is a surefire one. Then the next one says to recognize, this is letter L, to recognize that both parents bear the primary responsibility for the upbringing and development of the children, and that this is a social function for which the state and the private sector have secondary responsibility. So it's not just a woman. 20 years ago, we were saying, don't just put all this on me to say I got to raise 5 children. I told that to my husband and he was just like, what? And you can't just put that all on me. And this was when we had children 30 years old. So this is even before that. You can't just say to us that this is, because my 34-year-old was born. And that tells you how long ago this was. You can't just put this all off on the woman to do, that it is a parental responsibility. So if you call yourself a parent, you need to own up to the responsibility. The conversation is earlier today, we were talking about when much is given, much is required. So don't just put it off on the woman and then want to claim when I see it all the time, the father doesn't want anything to do with raising the children, but as soon as the child goes to Yale and Harvard, they're standing in the pictures. My daughter went to Yale and Harvard. It's like, sit down. You really want to say that because you know that they didn't have that inference of time with the child. They left it on the woman, they left it on the mother. But as soon as the child gets some kind of great accolade, now the father wants to step in. No, it's a parental responsibility. So you can bang your chest because you were a part of what it is that happened to that child as that child was coming up. And that is a huge, huge piece. As a male ambassador, speak on that as far as the male perspective, please.
Well, it is always important to complement the efforts of women in a home, especially when you're a dad. To some extent, there is always that aspect of saying that, a woman's place is a home. She has to take care of the home. She has to raise the children while the husband goes for work and does this other work, and the woman will be there. And you see that, at most times we have a lot of absent fathers. Absent fathers who are not there to take care of the children to complement the efforts of the woman, but they still want to get credit at the end of the day that is their child as well. But remember, at the end of the day, when you're building a home as a man and as a woman, the most important part is the emotional support that you give to your children. The little things that happen in your home. When I come back from work, I call my child, have you done your homework? Can we say a prayer together? Can we have dinner as a family? Can we watch soccer as a family? Can we go out shopping as a family? Those are little things, those little things put into perspective make a perfect home. It is not the bigger thing that you do for children or for your wife in a home that would make them love you more. It is the little things that you give to them. The good morning the breakfast in the morning, all those little things. So at the end of the day, I feel that it is basically a solemn responsibility of both parents to be primary caregivers in that particular home and not leave that work only for the woman to do and the man, being the man as they say. So we need to eliminate that mindset of toxic masculinity, where we say that a woman's place is just a home and a man's place is at the tavern with his friends, and a woman should be at home taking care of the kids, a man should be out there. You know what I'm saying? So it has to be like that. So we need to ensure that we create a conducive space where our children will be able to get both emotional support, spiritual support, educational support, religious support from both the father and the mother in that particular home, because both of you are like two wings, on a bird. A bird cannot fly on one wing. It can only fly on two wings. So these two wings support and complement each other so that the bird is able to fly well. And it is the same with the home. Two wings are needed to run a home perfectly and to raise children. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. And that is huge. And a lot of people don't realize how poignant that is, but especially when fathers do it, until something happens and the father can't get reached. And we do that here in the United States, where the father is out, he works elsewhere. He comes home maybe on the weekend, but something happens to the children throughout the week. And the father's like, oh my God, what's happening? What's going on? And and he's panicking, but he's not there. So the woman has to take it on the brow that she has to be the caregiver, the chauffeur driver, the homework checker, and all of those things. But then when something happens and the child dies, what does the father do? Well, what did you do? What did you do wrong? What did you, That was a case here recently where the father wanted to sue the wife. The husband wanted to sue the wife because he thought that the mother was negligent when the child fell and hurt his lip. And apparently the lip got infected and now he has like sepsis and all this. But the father wants to sue the wife for negligence of the child. But we're looking at him like, well, where were you when the child fell? Well, I was in California working. Okay. So of course it's not going to go any further. Of course, they're probably going to dismiss the case. But the father's actually trying to sue the wife because they're saying that the father was saying that the wife wasn't taking care of the child properly, and that's how the child fell. Well, if you were there, would the child have fallen? Maybe if you were there, the child may not have taken the tumble. You have to look at all of these insights to what it is that you're asking for and what you're saying, and be that present parent. Article 14 says that, are we changing? Oh, it's slow. It's frozen. Article 14 is health and reproductive rights. Number 1E says states parties to ensure that the rights of health of women, including sexual and reproductive health, is protected and promoted. And this includes the right to be informed of one's health status and on the health status of one's partner, particularly if affected by sexually transmitted diseases, including HIV/AIDS, and in accordance with internationally recognized standards and best practices. How many men have you heard in the case matters? And I know I deal heavily in Africa. How many measures have you heard that the husband has HIV, and because of the Africa CDC mandate that said that he doesn't have to reveal, that the women, he goes back and has sex with the women or his wife and she contracts it, and he doesn't have to reveal that he has HIV. So he is effectively giving her HIV because he's married to her and he doesn't have to reveal. 20 years ago, they said that there is a right for her to have his HIV status or the partner's status be revealed so that she can be protected. How many women find out in the United States that they are HIV positive when they take their pregnancy test? Because in the United States, when we take a pregnancy test through blood, we test for pregnancy and HIV status. How many women I know that I can say that I informed them that they are positive for the HIV virus at the same time that I told them, congratulations, you're 13 weeks pregnant. Why? Because the status of not reporting in the United States is held at a higher accountability, that you are not required to reveal, someone else is not required to reveal the status of an HIV patient to another person, but he is not revealing it either. So when he infects the woman and she becomes pregnant, now the woman and the baby is the risk. There is a case mandate here in the United States where the man is being charged with attempted murder, because the wife is now positive for AIDS, not HIV, AIDS. She's dying, and if she dies and the baby is affected and dies, that's murder times 2, because he did not reveal his status, and he essentially killed her affected her with the AIDS virus. So this is a huge, huge one. Number 2 says, state parties shall take all appropriate measures to provide adequate and affordable and accessible healthcare services, including the information, education, and communication of programs to women, especially those in rural areas. 20 years ago, they said rural women are required to have adequate and appropriate medical care. 20 years ago. 20 years ago. So why are still women walking 2 and 3 and 4 miles to a local infirmary, bleeding out in 100-degree heat? True story. Case in the Republic of the Gambia. A woman walked 3 miles, had to walk 3 miles in the scorching heat to get to a medical facility, and she was in labor. She ended up birthing the baby on the trail and bled out, because bled out, exsanguinated, means that the heat was so hot that it thinned her blood and she bled out. So they found her and the dead baby on the road, and she was 1.5 miles from getting there. So she had to walk 1.5 miles, had the baby, and then had to walk another 1.5 miles if she had made it. But she didn't. She fell right there, and because it was so hot and no one was there, she died. This was a rural woman just trying to get to a facility to have her baby. So her and the baby were found on the road. But 20 years ago, there was a piece in PACT that says that she had the right to have this facility either mobilized, brought to her, or her brought to them. Now, women that are in their last month, they're in their 36 weeks, they're supposed to be transported over to the hospital so that for the next month, so when they have the baby, they will be in a safe environment. But this wasn't in place 20 years ago. And this actually happened about 12 years ago. So this was already enacted when that woman died in the Gambia. So Ambassador, speak a little bit about this, please.
I think on this particular angle of health innovation, today we have aspects of telemedicine, where the health sector is now digitalized. You can be able to have access to medical care in the comfort of your home. You just press a smartphone and, drugs will be delivered to you. But in as much as the world is revolutionizing to that end, to the digital end, are we thinking about the people in rural areas? Because it seems like the only people that benefit to these innovations are people in urban areas. Because most of the people in rural areas don't even have access to smartphones. They don't even have access to the internet. And so how can they have access to telemedicine and other things? And that is what we're talking about. Because there is availability of hospitals, clinics, mobile clinics in towns. But when you go to rural areas, maybe you find that, like Dr. Mina was mentioning, a hospital is 3 miles away, a hospital is 6 miles away, and they have to walk. Others even spend 2 days on the way just to have access to a hospital. And that is very sad. So what are we doing? So I feel at the end of the day, governments should really invest in healthcare, especially in maternal health care for our rural women. Because even here in Zambia, in most of the rural areas, we've experienced cases of women giving birth in trials, on their way to the hospital, on their way to the clinic. They give birth on the way, they die there. We've also seen cases where, again, before I go there, it's not even about the availability of the hospitals, of the clinics. Again, it's about the quality of the services that are offered in those clinics and in those hospitals. Because you might find that a hospital can be there, but there are no medicines there. They don't even have surgical gloves. So at the end of the day, what are we doing to ensure that we have the availability of medicine, we have availability of different resources that are needed in those communities? So I feel it's a call to different governments across the globe to ensure that they invest in healthcare, especially maternal health care, because women are mostly affected. Yes, there is the aspect of using traditional medicine, herbs, those are good, but at the end of the day, a hospital, a clinic is vital. It has to be there within a particular radius so that it is accessible to every person in the community. And that is the investment governments have to make. Thank you.
That's correct. And I'm just going to throw this out there and move on. But telemedicine will never deliver a baby. So we still have to have the advantageousness of people and women that are going to be access to the actual proper care. So you mentioned that there are certain hospitals that don't have gloves and medicine and that type thing, but they don't even have the standards of care offered to them from the practice of medicine or those practitioners that are there. And that's a hard sell too, when so many women and men are going into medicine now, especially here in the United States. We have protocols that we're going to start with FIRE, where we train them here in the United States and they do their internship and residency, which is about 3 or 4 years in a developing country, so that they will get the propers of care and the students will get the training. And if that gets off the ground, that's going to be a huge event in rural areas and areas that are incompetent of care and the practice of care, so that they would be able to have that measure. So this is going to be even better. So thank you. Article 15, in the interest of time, we're going to speed this up a little bit. The right to food security. Now, this one trickled me a little bit. I'm going to speak 10 seconds on it, but it says provide women with access to clean drinking water and sources of domestic land, and the means of producing nutritious food. So we got more rights than anybody in this, because we're the ones that feed you, and we have a right to be able to be access to clean drinking water and sources of domestic fuel, land, and the means to produce nutritious food. So that means not only do we get the bacon, but we're supposed to have adequate ways to fry it up in the pan. No, but I'm mentioning this because that is amazing that 20 years ago that they realized that women are told to cook food and prepare meals, but they don't have the adequate resources or the adequate substance to do it. So this right was put into place, that we have the right to food security, because again, if you feed a man eats, but if you feed a woman, the village eats. So why not put the threshold of responsibility on the village to make sure that woman has the resources that she needs? I'm impressed, so impressed. Article 16, right to adequate housing. Yes, go ahead, please, Ambassador. I'm sorry.
I think the right to food security also borders on the issue of gender and climate change. Because remember that we are looking at governments also trying to, empower rural communities, especially with the most sustainable ways of producing food, right? Because this time we're talking about, environmental degradation, we're talking about deforestation. And I'll tell you that most of the women in rural areas depend on forests for survival. They practice what they call here shifting cultivation, where they cut down trees. They call it the Shitemene system. They cut down trees, they bend those trees, that is a source of fertilizer, and then they plant their food grows, they cultivate and all that. So I feel it also borders on the aspect of governments trying by all means possible to find the most sustainable ways and means of rural women and other women across the globe in producing this particular food and having access to clean drinking water. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. Very powerful and very needed, because we take it for granted, especially here in the United States. We have a toilet inside the house, and it flushes just nice. But we don't have that accessibility around the world, and that's where the content has to come in. That we're asking for these things, and we're asking for these things to be right and true, but then we have to have sustainable subsidies to provide for them. Next one is 16. We're halfway through. Right to adequate housing. This one states that women shall have the right to equal access to housing and to acceptable living conditions in a healthy environment. To include this right, state parties shall grant to women, whatever their marital status, I underline that, to access to adequate housing. So many women, as we were talking about, Dr. Burks and I were talking about, so many women are getting married just so that they can have adequate housing. They're getting married to these men just so that they can eat, or their family can eat because he's well-to-do. This protocol states that it doesn't make a difference if the woman is married, widowed, divorced, separated, annulled, young, old. She has the right to be granted adequate housing in a healthy environment. So don't put me on the side of the road next to the toilet drain. Put me in a healthy environment, regardless of their marital marital status. And I think that is huge. 20 years ago that they saw this. Huge. that women were just mistreated, and oh, well, you're not married, or your husband died, oh, you don't deserve any of this. If your husband was alive, maybe you wouldn't be in this situation. And I mean, this was huge 20 years ago. I remember this. I remember the plight of the women that came over 25 years ago, right before 9/11, when they were coming over here to escape that there were droves of women that said, look, I will leave my husband and my children just to have a peace of mind. And they were coming over here by themselves and alone, and then they would go back and get their kids once they get settled with a job. And that was amazing, because they were saying that there was no rights for them. And that just hit home for me. That just truly hit home for me. Article 17, the rights to positive culture context. Now that was huge. Now this is something that we lose when we come over here to the United States. We lose our culture, we lose our language, we lose our religion even. We assimilate to religions that we assume is easier for us. And the right to positive culture context says women shall have the right to live in a positive culture context and participate at all levels in the determination of their cultural policies. So let's not say, well, only women can do this and only men can do this, and only women are allowed to do this and only men are allowed to do this. In Islam, we have that huge thing where women can't be imams. So that doesn't mean they can't lead. We are the first teachers. We are the first teachers of children. So whatever we learn, we infect the children. So how are we not leaders? How are we not teachers? The only thing that men are saying is that we can't hold the title of imam. We don't have to. It's not a requirement. We are the first teachers. So that means you were taught by a woman before you was entitled to that title of imam. So we don't need that title because we birth imams. I hate to say it, that's our superpower. But the right to positive culture context is to say that the context of what we're utilizing in our tradition, in our language, in our tribal appropriations is our own. And if we decide that we have war paint or we have war scars, don't harass us for that. Don't talk about, women that come with the war scars from their tribe and their tradition and is embedded in their face, or they have the henna that has been permanently embedded in their face with the tribal markings, or they wear henna for their tribal traditions. They have a right to do that, even if they're in another country. They have a right to be able to get their food, or a right for their cultural foods during their certain traditions. If you're Catholic and you're going for communion, or you're going for your first penance, you have a right to have a Catholic church established so that they would be able to have those sacraments done and the Beatitudes accompanied. You have that right. But when you take that away from them, you are saying initially, 20 years ago, they saw that it was. When you take that right away from you, take away the dignity of a woman. And we always speak about respect, but we never speak about the dignity of a woman. And when you take that cultural context away, you take away and strip away that in and of itself. Any comments, Ambassador?
Well, you've rightly put it. I feel like a culture, when you talk about culture, it's a particular way of life of a particular people, and that has to be respected, that has to be upheld. Like you mentioned, we've met people coming from different, walks of life. They come to Zambia, for instance. We're in the same office. Maybe this person is Igbo, and they have their own way of dressing. They have their own African way of dressing. Work with Indians, like you mentioned, they have the henna, they have all those things. And to some extent, you feel that I have witnessed this firsthand, where most of those are laughed at, they are bullied, they are called old-fashioned. And most of those bad sentiments, given to them. But I feel at the end of the day, we need to respect the different cultures that exist around the world. It is a particular culture that makes a person to be who they are, because they are born from there and they have grown up in that particular culture. So instead of laughing at them when they do certain practices, let us embrace them and respect them and uphold that particular culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You are so right. Yes, absolutely. Article 18, right to a healthy and sustainable environment. Now, this one speaks specifically to the culture context, but this is almost like the marrying, of article, what is that? What was that? Health and, what was that? 14, health and protective rights, health and reproductive rights. And this is a right to a healthy and sustainable environment, to promote research and investment into new and renewable energy sources and appropriate technologies, including information technologies, and to facilitate women's access to and participation in their control. Now, this one I'm going to use, and I'm going to plug a piece that we're doing now. The Federation of International Gender and Human Rights has a new product. We don't normally do products, we do services, but we have a new product. It's called Luna Lux. And these are sustainable Mensi pads. These are the reusable Mensi pads that you wash them and wear them. They come in packs of 5. And they're able to be used by women in rural areas. And we're starting with them first. But what we're saying, the healthy and sustainable environment is, if we were to use the disposable ones, we would have upwards of 200 tons of waste that would be in our environment by the end of the year. And this is in a small country. This has nothing to do with, the larger countries of the DRC and Sudan and up north in Libya, in the African continent. Just in the smaller countries, in Rwanda or Togo or Gambia, these small areas would have upwards of 200 tons of waste from the napkins, from the disposable napkins, from the period items and that type thing. And we said, this is not going to happen, and this is not going to happen on our watch. So Article 18 speaks to the right to a healthy and sustainable environment. This is in B, in the measure in B. It says to promote research and investment into new and renewable energy sources and appropriate technologies. And we're using this as a technology. We're saying that this is a female technology, and we're using that title in our marketing, that this technology is going to go into the understanding of what women need to help them in sustainable communities. And this sustainable community technology is going to avail us the opportunity to have these measures given to us free of charge, so that we would be able to sustain it on our own. Since we're in rural areas and we may not have money to be able to have it, we will be able to sustain it on our own, because we will get it from the sources that will keep it. We have some sources that are going to Lebanon, some that is going to be going into other areas that are of need in the Asian countries. But we are focusing on Africa as a sustainable center for this. And we're going to build a factory that is going to allow this to have to be built, and to allow the measure of those articles to go over to the Asian countries, to the Middle Eastern countries, easier than coming from the United States. So the idea behind that is that healthy and sustainable environment, that she has to be able to feel like her community is contributing to her in that way. And I think Article 18 sums up by saying that these new technologies 20 years ago should have been in place. So Ambassador, speak to that, please.
Well, I feel you've really explained it all very well. I don't even know what to add to that.
That's right.
But I feel the promotion of research and investment in new and renewable energy sources and appropriate technologies, including ICT, that will facilitate women's access to information, and participation is very critical. More so that we are trying to, to promote a healthy and sustainable environment where no one is left behind. What I'm saying is that each and every person should have access to these technologies. Each and every person should have access to information. No one should be left behind, regardless of who they are. Everyone should have access to this particular information. No wonder why there should be a solely inclusive integration of both women, men, and children in this particular environment, so that they are able, to have access to, to different resources that they need at their disposal. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate that. And we are going to be marketing that. You'll see that coming up. But this is going to be our measure of sustaining Article 18 and making sure that women are accessible to these inalienable rights, and that rural women are equally into that conversation. Article 19 states right to sustainable development. Now, we just talked about, and we just brought into the point of sustainable environment. Now we have development. And D states that we are to promote access to credit, training, skill development, and extension services at rural and urban levels in order to provide women with a higher quality of life and reduce the level of poverty among women. what was that first word that they used? Credit. So microfinancing. We have a right to microfinancing. So to say that, oh, well, you are in a rural area, or you are uneducated, or you don't have a certain degree level, that's wrong. And that's wrong in and of its sense, because you're saying that because she has to have a certain criteria, it is beneath her to be able to be a good businesswoman or to have the sustainability. So the first thing says women's access to credit, training, skill development, and extension services at rural and urban levels in order to provide women with a higher quality of life and reduce the level of poverty among women. Harbor Heritage University, nope, wrong one, is doing that very thing. And we are allowing women to come on, and we are allowing tuition remission and scaled prices and reduced tuition and scholarships so that women don't have an excuse as to why it is that they cannot train. We give free classes every year, 3 and 4 times a year. Most of the people that have taken our classes took it because it was free. And most of the people that are using the classes right now in their communities are using it because it was given to them free. And you know, I have a board right now that's like, Dr. Mina, you're giving away too much. Yeah, well, if we get good reports that are saying that these women are making a difference, who loses? Who loses? We're going to give value to the work. If people are taking that and now attaining positions, like the ambassador to Cape Verde is now ambassador because she created and I say this, she created her own job in the government because they didn't have someone with gender and human rights in Cape Verde. So Ambassador Princess has invited herself to the table of the government, and now she has a position in the government. She took a free class. So to understand what it is that we are doing, the right to sustainable development is to say that FIRE, if nothing else, and I'm toting that horn, is to say that we are able to do it. I'm not saying that FIRE is the only one doing it or that we're better at it, but we are doing it because there is an ability to do it. And we're figuring it out, and we're having hiccups. I know Ambassador Bwalya, every now and again, he says, can we do such and such and such? Can we do that? Can we do this? Absolutely. I never say no. I just say, well, let's work that out together. Because if there is a way and an absolute in that, there is a methodology that we can have. And now that we have our new grant writer, we'll even have the money. So we are looking at the feasibility of doing these projects and doing these programs so that these women can get these rights. But 20 years ago, they saw this. I keep saying that, ladies and gentlemen, but 20 years ago, they saw this. And this is where it was great and right. Article 20 states widows' rights. Now, this one, we shouldn't even have to talk about it. I figured, like, if you get to the point where you're at an elder age or you're a widow, we shouldn't even have to talk about rights. You should have a retirement package that is just laid out for you. And I think the government should set that up. All you got to do is present the death certificate, and you should have an income stream. You should have schooling available. You should be able to have child care for your children, and his children should be able to have money coming in to be able to go to school. I mean, that's just, if I had a country to run, I'm telling you, we would have a widow's retirement package. All your husband has to do is just pass away. And same with men, especially if he was uneducated and his wife passed away and she was the one that helped with the house and the children, there should be a widower's package as well. But this states that there is a widow should have the right to remarry, and in that event to marry the person of her choice. What did Ambassador Bwalya say about the marrying, that the wife had to go to the brother and all that? That's not what this says. It says that she has her choice to marry, and this is huge. The widow should automatically be the guardian and custodian of her children, and after the death of her husband, unless it is contrary to the interests of the welfare of the children. So that means that the mother is not mentally well, that the children should be kept together in the compound, and other people or the community should rear the children. This has everything to do with the adage that it says it takes a village to raise a child. Because if something happens to the husband and the woman is not mentally right, which happens, we call it the widower's disease here in the United States, where the wife kind of checks out mentally and she is not right in her mind because she doesn't have a partner and she's depressed and all of that. The children should be gathered up and raised by an aunt or a sibling or someone in the community. This is where it means that the children have a right to that that fair and equitable rearing. But widows' rights in and of itself says that the widow should have a right to remarry. So that helps her in her mental state. And then she should invent so she has the right to marry the person of her choice. So don't commit her to another arranged marriage. Let her do what she sees fit for her family. Maybe it's best for her not to remarry. Maybe it's best for her to just raise her children and focus on her children. But let her have that right. Ambassador Bwalya, any thoughts?
Yes, please. I'll say this. 95% of the widows on the African continent go through massive abuse in the hands of, the late husband's relatives.
Correct.
And it's very sad, especially if, the death of the spouse is suspected to be maybe something like a murder or something spiritual, or so the widow is basically made to go through a lot of traditional processes. They go to the traditional healer, they do this to her, they even beat her sometimes. And like I mentioned, if it's the cleansing thing, the widow is made to sleep with the relative to the deceased. She crawls, she does what. There is a lot that happens, and widows go through a lot. And I think this is basically tied to the inhumane treatment, the humiliation that they go through. And you find that most of the widows even die at the end of the day because of the humiliation, because of the abuse that they go through. And people do not basically pay attention to this. They just say, she was just a widow. I was very surprised. I was watching a documentary where, this widow was made to drink the water that was used, to wash her husband's corpse. Imagine, just imagine a dead body. I know, because we're suspecting that you killed your husband. So if you want to plead your innocence, you have to drink this water. Is that really necessary? That is abuse to the highest level. And the world is silent about these abuses that women go through. Do you know how detrimental that is, especially to someone's mental health? It kills them. It kills them. So at the end of the day, I feel that the widow's rights is something that should be spoken about, especially in the African continent. We need to ensure that we discard all the different traditional and cultural beliefs and practices that are done to the widows when they lose a spouse.
That's right.
Because most of those are harmful. And I think that is the point. And I feel, Dr. Mina, it marries to the next article. I think article 21, which is talking about the right to inheritance. Yeah, I think you can speak to that. I don't know if I can speak to that, or you can speak to that.
Sure, absolutely. The 21, it says right to inheritance. A widow still has the right to an equitable share in the inheritance of the property of her husband. We talked about that before. A widow should have the right to continue to live in the matrimonial house. And in case of remarriage, it shall remain this right in the house as it belongs to her, and she has inherited it. So look at that. Yeah, please speak on that. Oh my goodness.
Property grabbing is also very rampant as we talk about the right to inheritance. Because remember, when a spouse dies in a home, they have died. There's nothing that you can do. That's why in Zambia, we have what we call the Interstate Succession Act. The Interstate Succession Act, which talks to, how property is going to be shared, between the different parties. So for instance, the children will get 50% of the father's wealth. The wife will get 20%. The parents to the late husband will get 20%. And the dependents at home, the people they'll just keep you will get 10%, which is equivalent to 100%. And that is all in the act, and it has been followed in some parts of the country. But you find that the people do not even fear the law. The Interstate Succession Act is there, but still property grabbing is rampant. I'll give a personal example. When I lost my father, it was very sad that his relatives came on board and said, we're going to sell this house because our relative built this house with my mother. So they wanted to sell the house so that we can share 50% 50% my mom, and they get 50% from dad's contributions. And that was very sad. And everyone came on board, and then they were saying that, you know what? This house was built for the children. Your brother had children, and he has children. He has left children. If you sell this house, where are they going to go? And Dr. Amina, this is where you're finding that we have a lot of street kids today, destitute in society. Not that these kids parents, or they did not have a roof on their head, but because they lost the parent and they were kicked out, they were grabbed off of their property, and now they're on the streets and they're dying on the streets. And this is where everything goes. So I feel, governments and states should ensure that they strengthen the legislation systems, legislation on the right to inheritors, that property grabbing should be discarded. It has to be gotten rid of. We need to ensure that we protect the interests of the widow and the orphan children. At the end of the day, that is what we need to focus on, and the law should surely take its course. Because remember, this document was drafted 20 years ago, when the aspect of property grabbing was even rampant, when some of these interstate succession acts were not even there. So they foresaw that, a woman is supposed to be protected. And they knew that this was going to work out even in the long run. And so I feel this is a timely document because it speaks to this, and most of these women don't even understand what this is about. But if they get hold of the information, they know about the widow's rights, they know about their right to inheritance, no one is going to challenge them because this is written and it has been adopted. And that should be the action we need to take. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And that's true. What we are looking at is we are getting rights enacted that wouldn't ordinarily have been enacted. But 20 years ago, it was written into law that it should have been enacted. So this is where we're struggling to understand why, even with your Interstate Succession Act, there is a huge land grab. Why is it still happening? What is it that these laws are not doing, or are the people just not respecting the laws in what it is? So why even set them? Why even have them if the respect is not going to be there? So this is where the challenge comes in, to re-infer what it is that we already have as a right, and then what the governments can do to step in to help. So thank you so very much for tanting on that. All right, this one, Article 22, this is special protection for elderly women. So not only over 18, but under 100. So we're going to use elderly women, provide protection to elderly women, and take specific measures to commiserate with their physical, economic, and social needs, as well as their access to employment and professional training. So this is saying, even when we get as old as me, and we're looking at 60 quickly, we are still looking at understanding that we have value, we have worth. And here it is, in my 50-something, I'm doing this organization and making sure that there are people that I will leave a legacy to. I'm going to hand this torch off to somebody eventually. And hopefully I will be able to leave a legacy in each of the countries that we have ambassadors in, so that they can pick it up and take fire to the next level, and then come together and join forces. And I see it as this thing, I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember Transformers, how each leg and arm is a car, and then the middle is the truck, and the head is another, and how they all come together and they make this big, gigantic robot. I want fire to look like that, where each entity is sufficient in and of itself, but when they come together, this is where we are allowing the greater power to see. And I'm doing that as a senior. The other day, I just got my AARP card, which is for retired persons. And it is saying that I am officially a senior citizen. So knowing that is to know that now I felt like, oh, wow, so does that mean I'm no longer valid? No, 20 years ago, they said, not only are you valid, but we want you to have economic, social, and employment and educational rights. So they can't say, okay, you're 60 and you want to go back to school. Okay, you're too old to do this. No, come on in, sit down, let's help you to become a doctor. Because that's the next thing. You can retire in the rest of your life, and now you have doctor status. Or you want to finish going back and starting that business. well, I'm too old. Well, elders are not too old to start a business, because that could be a childcare business. How many young women would appreciate that? Because I know if I was taking care of children, I mean, if I had needs for my children, or if I had children that had needs, I would want an elder to take care of it. Why? Because they've been there, done that, got a t-shirt, they have the best experience, they have the best food, they love them to death because they love them as their own, and they give that nurturing thing that I would like to give. I may not cook as well as my 80-year-old aunt, but I can say that I can put a mean meal together. So understanding that elderly people have those same rights, they have those same abilities. We just need to respect it. Ambassador, did you want to add anything to it? For the interest of time, I wanted to move on, but did you want to add anything to it?
No, please. I think let's go to the next one.
Okay, sure. 23, protection of women with disabilities. Now, this is a huge one, to ensure protection of women with disabilities and to take specific measures commensurate with their physical, economic, and social needs, and to facilitate their access to employment, professional and vocational training, as well as their participation and decision-making. How huge is that, Ambassador? That not only just because I'm disabled that I got to do what you tell me to do, but I have a right to make the decisions for my life, even as a disabled woman. Speak to that, please.
Sure. One lady, I think you know her, Christine Sharma. Christine Sharma is a disabled young lady who was born with a condition. So she's not able to walk, but she uses crutches when walking. She was recently appointed a human rights commissioner by the Republican president due to her influence in the country and a fight for the rights for the disabled people. So I feel at the end of the day, we need to create, again, a conducive environment, not just for the able people, but also for the disabled. They have the right to employment. They have to enjoy both the economic, social, and political rights. Are we able to elect someone to public office when they're disabled, or do we discriminate against them? We've seen a lot of people that are doing greater businesses, people that sew, people that draw, who are artists but they're blind, people that do a lot of beautiful stuff, and so at the end of the day, we have a duty as states to ensure that we create inclusive policies that will not discriminate against anyone, regardless of who they are, whether they are women, men, people that are disabled, and all those things. Dr. Amina, there was a story in some part of an area in Malawi where women, albino women, were used for money ritual. They were killed for money ritual in Malawi. They're saying that these are not human beings. These have a different color pigmentation, and so we cannot live with them in the same community. These ones have to be used for money ritual, and that is what they were using for. And part of Tanzania, in some area, some rural area, they were poaching those women and killing them and using them for money ritual. Mutilating them. It was very sad. So at the end of the day, we're saying that we need to, to create an inclusive environment, regardless of who a person is, whether they have autism, they are an albino, they are blind, they are deaf, they're not able to walk. They are human beings like each one of us. It's just that they are able in a different way, and they can do the same work that we do, just differently. So at the end of the day, governments should ensure that they create inclusive policies that will not discriminate against these other parties. So at the end of the day, special protection of women with disabilities is basically primal in this state, so that we're able to create a more participatory environment, a decision-making environment. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay, I was muted. I apologize. Yes, you're right. And I thank you for that, because there's a powerful piece that's going forward in that, where there are people that are standing in the gap for those that are disabled, the muted, those muted voices that are not able to step up and step to the table. So there's a huge movement in that, where people are becoming disability advocates that are fighting for the rights of those people. So this is where we're coming into the understanding. Yes, okay, so we do have 30 minutes left. Okay, so Number 24, Columbia University saying they have 30 minutes left to the class time. So we gotta speed it up before they lose the link. Special protection for women in distress, Article 24. And this states to ensure the protection of poor women and women heads of families, including women from marginalized population groups, and provide an environment suitable to their condition and special physical, economic, social needs. So this speaks to not only the disability, but when a hardship measures, when the husband has to leave home and go to work, where she's the head of household, or he dies. They're saying that women should have special protections in the time of distress. If she can't make the money or she can't make the bills because she has too many children and she really can't afford childcare to go do the work, there should be special accommodations for her to have a home business or to have that credit and that microfinancing to start the business, or to allow her to at least contribute to the children by starting maybe an agro farming or a status or situation that will allow her to be able to earn and to protect her children. This is to include people with special needs as well. So piggybacking on the disability piece, whether you have no disability or you have a disability, the women in distress has a special protection that states that they are still to be insured, whether their economic status, whether they're heads of households, or their physical and mental abilities. And this speaks to the power of what women in any status means. And I'm glad that they broke it down this way, because sometimes we just say, oh, if they're disabled, or if they're rural, or if they're head of household, or they're widow. But this says in any status that if she's in distress, she deserves the right. Number 25 is remedies. Remedies is to ensure that such remedies are determined by competent judicial, administrative, or legislative authorities, or by any other competent authority provided by law. What does that mean? That means if anything has to be done, that there has to be remedies in place that are done by, it says, by competent judicial, administrative, or legislative authority. So that means if there's anything that's afoot, that these remedies need to come by these legislative status. They are to include them in their description and job descriptions at their level. So if they have judicial powers, if they have legislative powers, even if they have communal powers, and they are chiefs of an area, they have the right to be able, the women have the right to be able to go to these people for remedies to this. And they should be given these remedies so that they don't have to worry about, well, who do I go to? You are to be able to go to anyone that is either judicial, administrative, legislative, or any other competent authority in their village as by law. So if you're a chief and you want to tote that you're a chief, you need to provide a remedy for this woman. Don't just say, oh, you're a widow and I'm a chief. Okay, well, because you're a chief, those widows need to have those rights and you need to stand up to them. So if you're an advocate for this, and we're going to have to establish these protocol advocates, that they are going to go to these chiefs and say, you can't sit on that throne if you're not going to give these women these rights. And I don't care how rain and blue blood and all that you are, you still have this right. If you're going to hold this position, you need to hold the power, and the power is in the prestige of what it is that you offer for these women. Number 26, implementation and monitoring. Now, why do we have all of this? And then number 26 falls in our lap, okay? This one is the one that they should have first. It says state parties undertake and adopt all necessary measures. I underlined all necessary measures, and in particular shall provide budgetary and other resources for the full and effective implementation of the rights herein. So that means all governments are supposed to be putting money in their budget to take care of all of this. So what does that mean when the government says, well, we don't have any money to do that? You're wrong. Maputo says that you're supposed to already have it in your budget. If he says, well, we don't have any money to start these new programs, you're wrong, because we have advocates that are out here that's willing to stand in the gap and do this, but you need to pay them. You need to compensate them, and you need to allow them to be compensated for the research that Dr. Bwalya does, for get them audible grants and repeatable, or I call it automated grants that are repeatable grants, so that when Dr. Burks get you a grant in January, you can get it in February, in March, in April, in May, and keep getting it. Don't cut it off because you decided, oh, we're giving away too much money. No. It should be written in the grant that this is a repeatable grant for at least a year, so the woman is safe for at least a year. This is where implementation and monitoring comes in, because it allows the woman to know that someone is going to be looking over the shoulder at the government and saying, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and you're not doing it the right way, and here are my rights. Here's my rights. I'm explaining them to you, and here's my rights under law. Okay, number 27, and I want to give a chance for, I'm doing it fast because I want Ambassador Bwalya to come in and give gems at the end. 27 is interpretation. This is where he mentioned it. Interpretation is seized by the matters of interpretation arising from the application or implementation of this protocol. That is language, that is culture, that is tradition. So you are to be able to get this written in your language. And that's why I was telling him when he mentioned that quite a few articles ago, that interpretation is in fact. So we can't say, well, because this particular one is written in English, that is not written in Tree, that is not written in Fula or Mandinka. We are to make sure that each of these are translated. We have someone that does that. Ambassador Princess, we talked about that. She is the one over business contracts, linguistic business contracts. So she is the one to make sure that there is someone that can translate business contracts in that language so that FIRE can have a reputable translation of all business contracts that we have coming forward. So she can be one of the ones that can ordain this so that all languages are respected in this. And then there can be one that is empowered, that she goes through Ambassador Bwalya in the African Union and states that we as FIRE will be the one to translate it. So all languages will be able to be represented under this. That is something we can do, and we can formulate that. And it is big shoes to fill, but it is something that we can do. 28, Ambassador Bwalya, I want you to speak on 28, signature, ratification, and ascension. This is saying that protocols will be open for signature, ratification, and ascension of the state parties in accordance with their respective constitution procedures. That means we need to be able to amend it. So if we see, like we talked about telehealth, and we say that we're going to get a mobile device, if we see that we don't have broadband or bandwidth in rural areas, that we got to ratify it and say we're going to add broadband into those health measures. So if we don't have a reputable internet in that area, that are part of that programming, and the budgetary amounts that are going into that programming is going to include internet. So we're going to have that, and we're going to speak to that in the ratification and ascension. That means moving forward. When we ascend up in this and we get better in this, that we're going to ratify it to continue this in perpetuity. So we're going to make sure that all of this, and it says, number 2, it says instruments of ratification or ascension shall be deposited within the chairperson at the commission of the African Union. That's Ambassador Bwalya. So if we have any changes to this, we're going to present it to him, and he's going to send it up so that we can see if this can be changed into this document. So if we see that there's something that's usable for all of humanity, and it's something that can be changed in this protocol, maybe in next year when it's 21, we'll have a change in that has been represented by our African Union representative. Article 29, entry into force. Article 29 is speaking into this. Each state party that exceeds to this protocol, after it's coming into force, the protocol shall come into force on the date of deposit of the instrument of accession. So that means if this country comes into succession or comes into accession, and we have another country that comes into it, like we had South Sudan was added not just recently, but quite a few years ago, it was the last one that was added. This came in before the Sudan became a country in 11. This came into it in 03. So Sudan has to pick this up. That's what it means. So any other country that comes after this, they have to pick it up as law. So this is great because it's allowing entry into force. So that means you enforce it as soon as the country becomes ratified. As soon as the constitution becomes accepted and approved. And this document needs to come as a right, budgetary, which is the economic piece, as well as physically into force. So this is a huge piece also. And this allows us to have this going into force. 30 is amendment and revision. This is also stating that we are allowed to amend this, which is what we talked about in signature and ratification. We are allowed to amend it, and us as Black women have that force. This is stating that we have that right to amend it, and we have that right to amend it as it is written. So we don't have to go through acts of Congress and and legislative bodies that, take us through changes and all of it. No, we can go right to where the source is, say that this is what we want to have amended, state our case, and the amendment will be added to it. And there's nothing that we need to do. In the one that we're reading, it says any state party may submit protocols for the amendment of the revision of this protocol. So you don't even have to be in Rwanda to state a revision that is in DRC. We don't need that. And we don't need to make sure that that is done. If you're in Ethiopia and you see something wrong in Niger, say something, bring it to the AU. And it's saying that they are able to make the revisions as needed. Article 31, and this one really speaks to the transition of it, the status of the present protocol. None of the provisions in the present protocol shall affect more favorable provisions for the realization of the rights of women contained in the national legislation of the state parties or in any other region, continental or international conventions, treaties, or agreements applicable to these state parties. So that means that whatever it is that we are doing it to better the people, and no one law is going to be better than all. All of them are going to come together for the right of what it is that we are seeing to be true and right. And this is what we are adamant and seeing what it is that we are having in our own right. And what it is that we are seeing is, oh, I hit the button, I'm sorry. What it is that we are seeing this to be the status of present protocol so that women will be able to rectify it themselves. We don't need someone to actually stand in force. We need someone to represent us, to bring it to these national stages and have these people bring it to the forefront. So all I have to do is call up Ambassador Bwalya. How are we going to write this up in legislator? Let's do it. And then he brings it to us, and he says, I'm representing Dr. Mina Ali, a African woman that is wanting this to be ratified. So he is stepping in as a representative, but he is also speaking for us. So we are saying not one law is better than the other, but all of them are unified to be able to assess the status of the women. So in number 32, in the last one, I'm going to transition and provisions and the traditional remedies. We are saying that we are pending the establishment of the African Court on Human Rights and People's Rights. We shall have seized matters on the interpretation arming from the application and implementation of this protocol. So that means when we establish this court, we are establishing this court so that we can have those that are coming into force to be able to establish this protocol in their rights. So we're not doing this to make matters worse for the people. We're doing this because we want to make an eligible force of what we are needing to do transitional throughout the countries. And we're making it so that this will be a repeatable solution for those that are coming after us. And it says in witness of they're the heads of, go ahead, Ambassador, I'm sorry. Ambassador Chisala, did you want to say something?
No, Dr. Amina, you can go ahead.
Okay. In this, it says, we witness thereof, the heads of African state and the government, we have signed this convention, and it is done in the city of Maputo on this 11th day of July 2003. I like the way they put that. It is done in the city. So that means don't even question us. Don't even deal with us. Don't even say anything other than what it is that we said to be true and right. Now, I want you to look at this screen. These are the countries that have signed it. I want you to look in it and see if your country is on there. For those that are on the live stream that are seeing this and they are looking at it, if you are of these member states, I want you to see if your country is on there. Zambia is 54, but it is not in the order that they signed it. It is in alphabetical order. So please understand that. Do not look at this as saying that Algeria was the first one to sign. Actually, it was done in the city of Maputo. So that was the first one to sign it. So we have to understand that this is an order of alphabet, and they are saying that, and we see because of our representative, of course, Zambia was one that signed it. I also see the Gambia is 22. That's my home country. They are the ones that signed it. And we are seeing that all of these provisions are being made. But if you notice, not all the countries are represented. I just want to put that out there. How many do we see that are represented? And how many are really duly opening what it is that is necessary and right. And I want you to look at that. And I want you to see this. I want you to see this in what it means, and how many we have the 55 label there, but well, we have there's 54 countries, but we have the territories. When I say all of them are not, all the territories are not on there. And this is something that allows me to see a difference. The African territories are not listed because they didn't sign it, because they didn't feel as though that they had that right under the African Convention to be able to sign it. So we have 55 here. We have 55 listed, but all of them signed it, but they don't have the areas like Somaliland, Western Sahara, and the what was it? It's called Polisario, that's in Morocco. So those didn't sign them. They didn't sign the treaty. So we were curious as to why they didn't, but to understand that Somalia is here. So see it, Somalia, I think that's what, 46, I can see it. They signed it, but Somaliland did not sign it. And that bothers me because that's a part of the continent. So these are disputed lands, and these are autonomous regions that have not signed the treaty. So the countries sign it, the land masses have not signed it, or the territories have not signed it, and that's a problem. That's something we also have to get into play. So really quick, final thoughts. We have about 10, 15 minutes before we have to log off. So final thoughts, Ambassador Bwalya, I need you to give us a great overview so we can send us home, because the students are really, really looking for your closing arguments as to what it is that we should do from this moment forward. So Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amina. Firstly, congratulations to the African Union for this great document. And congratulations to all the countries that have adopted, this document. Right. That is the congratulatory part. But my main area of concern is, what is happening on the ground and what is in the document are two different things. Countries ratify to this document, but at the end of the day, what is happening in these countries is something that is different. So you see that when we talk about gender and human rights, see how many countries are promoting gender and human rights? How many countries are promoting rights for women in Africa? There are few countries. How many countries are still, holding on to harmful gender traditional norms that have continued to impede on the rights of women? A lot of countries. How many of these countries have continued to uphold the widow and inheritance rights, those that are harmful? A lot of countries. How many countries are not able to promote quality education for women and opportunities for women? A lot of countries. How many of these countries have continued to adopt toxic masculinities in the workplace, in institutions, and in many other spheres of life that impede negatively on women? A lot of countries. So we still have a lot of work to do on the ground. We always say that, in Africa and maybe some other parts of the world, we are so good at writing and putting down things on paper, but implementing them on the ground is something that is very difficult. One, we're failing to invest, to offer a national gender budgetary reform, for this work that the different people are doing on the ground. Most of the countries are failing to invest in that. But remember that in order for this policy, in order for this document to be effective on the ground, different governments, those that signed this document, those that are sent to this document, should be able to invest in this work. Firstly, governments should invest in CBOs, community-based organizations, those that are working with the people, the actual people on the ground, the people in rural areas. Let them invest in them so that they're able to retranslate this document and the many other laws that pertain to women's rights in a language that they're able to understand. Government should also invest in non-governmental organizations, both at local level, national level, and regional level, so that we are able to do this work efficiently and effectively. Government should also invest in the necessary ministries by ensuring that we adopt the necessary gender policies that speak to gender equality and gender equity. Zambia, for instance, adopted what we call a Gender Equality and Equity Act of 2015 that speaks to gender equality. We're not saying that Zambia as a country is perfect. No, it's not perfect. But we are trying as a country with the little initiatives that we are putting forward. Remember that the Maputo Protocol is now 20 years old, but countries in the African Union and beyond have a mandate. We have the Agenda 2030, Agenda 2065, that should be realized. And the aspect of gender and human rights still, and according to their research, gender equality will only be attained in 135 years to come. But the little efforts that we're putting in as countries, as signatories to this document, as NGOs, important, because at the end of the day, we need to ensure that you create a sustainable environment where we're going to impact the communities today. We leave a legacy today, a legacy that will go in there even for the next generation to come. So basically, Dr. Amina, there is a lot of work that we need to do. Dear students, there is a lot of work that needs to be done on the ground. The Maputo Protocol is a great document. It has got its own reservations. It is open, to critique. It is open to ratification. But at the end of the day, what we're saying is that we need to ensure that we support this document, especially on the ground, so that the majority of the women are able to understand their rights. They're able to understand what stands in for them. Thank you so much. I think you're muted, Dr. Amina.
Muted.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
good. Okay, good. Thank you. I was saying thank you so very much. There's a student that had a very great question, and I'm looking at the login now. And the question that I'm going to leave everyone with, and I know Ambassador Bwalya has a great answer for it, but in the interest of time, we can't go in it. But I think those that are listening and the students, especially the students in NYU, because he's in Columbia, the student asked, Dr. Amina, in all that we are saying for women, especially women there, why is it that we don't practice this here in the United States and send that example home? And that's a great question. Why don't we do this here in the United States and send that home? So in other words, send the message home that we're not going to be treated that way. Here in the United States, we have all these inalienable rights. We have all these rights that are allowing us to go to work and to go to school, and you can't talk to us that way. And here in the United States, you look at me wrong in a certain way, that's harassment. So that's a criminal punishable crime. So why can't we hold that to be true and right as a formidable right as women of color, and say that not only are we holding this to be true in the United States as a citizen or as someone that has come to the United States that has that right, that why can't we bring that back home? Why can't we use that same strategy? Because we have the mandate. It's already written for us. The mandate is already here. It's outlined. All the governments have to do is adhere to what was already written by the governments. Who do you think compiled this? The governments got together and put it together. That's where the African Union comes in. And they got together and they say all of them agree to this one thing. So if all of the country states are saying that this is what we want, this is how we want it 20 years ago, why isn't it that women here in the United States don't add to the cause of the advocacy for women over there and speak as a woman from the African continent? Now, of course, I was born and raised here, but I still speak for an African woman, because the blood that runs through me is the same blood that's running through people that are in the Republic of the Gambia as we speak. So I have that lineage. I have that right. I call that the blue blood of being an African woman. But I see that in the totality of knowing that what I'm responsible for is to make sure that my children, African women, are in the right frame of mind to get these rights no matter where they go. So if they go back home, they have the rights. It's written. If they stay here, they have the rights. It's documented and written. So why are we still having this conversation? This should be something that's like, look, I'm a Black woman, hear me roar, and it should be one of those things that we stand in in full assignment with the other countries. And I really and truly think that that question just really triggered a lot in me, because it makes me realize that there's a lot of work to do. And as long as I'm here and I have breath, I'm going to continue to do this work. But part of this work is to understand what we're doing with the work that we're doing it. What are we doing with it? Are we just doing it just to have protocols in place? Or are we doing it to affect change on protocols that are already written 20 years ago? And is this something that we're going to continue? And I think that this is where we have to lead in our advantageousness. And I know Ambassador Bwalya is doing that. He has the research center that we use. He has the technology that is in place. So it's not like we don't have it. We're going to use it, and we're going to use it more often. So I thank each and every one of you. I thank Columbia, NYU for coming. Thank you for those that stayed online. We started out with well over 100 students. Now we're down to about 70 students. Thank you so much for those that stayed the entire time. Thank you for those that stayed here on the Zoom. Madam Ambassador Alana Kling from the Trinidad, Republic of Trinidad. Dr. Carmen Burks is here. We have, who else is here? We had Ambassador Wissam Dodar, and I know he had to leave because he always has a meeting at this time of the day at 1 o'clock our time, but it's getting late there also. And I want to thank all of you for seeing this for the first time, celebrating the Maputo report. And thank you, Dr. Bwalya, for being an intricate part in keeping this alive. I know you represent the African Union, and this is going to stay, but I thank you so very much for holding this torch and keeping this energy alive. We thank you. We love you. As Black women in this, we love you for holding the gate open for us and allowing this to be the standing ground, and allowing us to have this table built with you there. So thank you so very much. Thank you for being part of this. I really appreciate all of you. I don't want to lose time on this. Any last words, Ambassador Bwalya? We have like 6 minutes before it disconnects.
Well, I think I said my final remarks. I just want to thank you, Dr. Mina, for inviting me to be part of this important day. The Maputo Protocol is a very important document, and our fight for the rights of women continues, because we are living amidst women whose rights have been women whose rights are not being upheld, women who are being discriminated against, women's rights that are not being protected and respected. And so for me, my job, my duty at the Federation and at the African Union is to collaborate as much as possible with the local organizations, with the government institutions, and also with different individuals and stakeholders in this fight. I trust and I know that at the end of the day, we will win this fight, and women will surely get a chance to shoot this life. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Yes, that was powerful. We will win this fight. That's absolutely right. Thank you so very much, Ambassador Bwalya. Thank you for dignitaries that have come, ambassadors that stayed, and the students that took great advantage in this information. I hope to see great reports from you guys. I hope to see great policies put out there for those that are in law and political science, those that are in international diplomacy. I pray that you meet us there at the table where we sign into the amendments into this great article. I'm going to stay protected in this, and I'm going to make sure that you have the greatest solidarity in this. Thank you, Ambassador Bwalya. And to all of you, have a great night.